Hello, and welcome to the first official episode of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
And I'm Mark Bishop.
And Mark Bishop is my father. And so for the point of this podcast, we're going to be looking through A New History of Western Philosophy by Anthony Kenny. And my dad is actually a philosophy major and is currently a lawyer. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am not only a philosophy major, I have a degree in philosophy.
Yes.
So I got a undergraduate degree in philosophy in the school that most people think of when they think of study of philosophy, University of Missouri St. Louis.
It's very prestigious.
Yes. And then I went on to law school and became a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. And so he obviously knows a lot more than me about philosophy, so kind of counting on him to kind of guide me through this book as we read it. We read the introduction for this first episode, and the introduction really talks about the point of the book, and I guess what will be the point of our podcast moving forward, because the book will be the framework for our podcast. It really talks about how we look at philosophy, a historical approach and a philosophical approach, based on either like how we look at it within culture throughout time, or how we actually look at the ideas themselves. Very interesting book so far. Absolutely massive book. It's like over 1,000 pages long.
Yeah, so we decided to do a podcast, and we had kind of practiced a couple times, and it was unfocused, and so you came up with a brilliant idea of let's have a book and kind of go through that book as kind of as a lead off of each podcast, and so you selected this one, which actually is over 1,000 pages, and was originally 4 volumes. And,
yes.
It's been condensed, so to speak, into one rather large, massive paperback.
It's not very condensed. It is very, very large.
So that's it's a good way to kind of jump off and kind of keep us focused, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what you want to do as far as the first topic, but of course I think the first question is, why would we study it or read it? As far as the history of Western philosophy, what's the point of this?
Well, the book really says there's 2 main reasons to study philosophy, and that's for historical context and a philosophical context, like I said before. We can really study philosophy either to get an idea of history and culture of people at the time, or we can look at philosophy in the way that it builds upon itself and how it leads to our philosophies today.
I think there's a third reason.
Because what is that?
Because it's fun.
Because it's fun. Because there's nothing more fun than picking up a over 1,000-page textbook, basically.
Well,
fun for us, maybe.
For each their own.
Yes.
All right. So what kind of thoughts? Obviously, there's he puts Mr. Kenny puts forward like 2 main reasons to study the history of Western philosophy, and one's basically as a historian, the other one is to study the ideas behind the different philosophers as they evolved over time. And so what do you think what was your primary motivation? Just curiosity as a student of history, or are you more interested in the ideas, or what?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I know so little about it, really. I guess I would lean more towards historical, just because I know very little about philosophy in general, so it's hard for me to say that I'm studying this for the philosophical purpose rather than the historical purpose, because I probably know more about the history than I do the philosophy, which are both very little, but I feel like history takes priority for me personally.
Really?
I think so. I
Well,
mean,
why do you care then? I mean, we could be studying the history of African tribes if we're just interested in learning history.
well, because I'm not just interested in learning history, I should say it's easier for me to look at this in a historical context because I have more knowledge of history, but I do want to learn the philosophy aspect. I think.
Aha!
Yeah.
That's your primary motivation.
Well, I figured that would be obvious that I want to look at philosophy, considering this massive 1,000-page book that I have sitting in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's there's 2 different approaches, but I think the reason why you study Western philosophy is because pretty much all modern things that are good came from the development of Western philosophy.
And what makes you say that?
Well, can you think of anything that developed from as far as a cultural or economic or societal major benefit that developed under a different system other than Western philosophy?
Well, I can't
Like
think
European?
of any, but like I said, I know very little about philosophy in general. So
Well, I mean, there's other, there's Eastern thought, and the Chinese, because that brought us the golden gift of Mao Zedong and Chinese communism. That's been a great boon to society in the 20th century.
yeah, it's been wonderful.
And so they've only been able to hold on because they've adopted certain theories of economic growth and modified it under the totalitarian system. They've kind of loosened up and adopted a lot of pseudo-capitalistic reforms so that they can continue without having people, killing them and starting a new government. But be that as it may,
Yeah.
I'm a little prejudiced in favor of European, American, Western philosophy.
Well,
As
lucky
you
for you, we have an over 1,000-page book called A New History of Western Philosophy. So I think we'll be covered on that front.
Yes.
So what is your primary motivation what was your original motivation in learning philosophy, I should say, to get your degree in philosophy?
Originally, I was a lot different than what I am now. I was younger then.
Yes.
And I was a little full of myself. I'm not now. I'm very
very humble.
humble.
Yes, extraordinarily humble, I would say.
And the big thinkers and the thoughts and the studying of the nature of reality and philosophy and religion, God, morality, ethics, the big stuff. I thought everything else was a waste of time. It was also ultimately a little bit easier than calculus and physics and
Yes.
computer science. Yes. So I was really just kind of unfocused, but I really had a passion for it at the beginning, and then over time, at some point you realize, well, nobody really has the answer. Human.
Well, that's why
really
there's
has the answer.
over 1,000 pages just looking for the answer, and I'm sure there won't be a definite one at the very end of this book.
I think at the end of all of this, you'll come to the same realization I did somewhere circa 1990 that I've been wasting a lot of my time studying Western philosophy. What on earth am I going to do with all this knowledge? And
well, maybe it's not so much the actual knowledge behind it, but the ability to really think these things through with the knowledge that you have. Not just maybe knowing specific philosophies, but knowing how they got there and knowing where we can take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, I was just kind of joking, but it really does help you in how you formulate, how you look at the world and formulate arguments. Of course, it's helped me because the field I end up going to is in the legal field and as a trial lawyer. And I took a lot of logic courses in undergrad, and that really helped. Just kind of give you a format for thinking through problems and articulating, arguments and trying to convince people, of what your position is. And so it was beneficial. It wasn't a complete waste of time, but at some point I got kind of cynical about it because it's like, okay, well, we can study these things at the end of the time and never come to a definitive conclusion. Of course, Mr. Kenny actually talks about that. I mean, some of the things, the concepts over time that were the study of philosophy kind of, once they were established, became science and biology and medicine. This started off as more a philosophical discussion, a theoretical discussion. And so it still has value. And even in, especially in the medical field, ethics and as the science moves forward, and even like the computer science, the ethics of artificial intelligence. I mean, and implications for all of us going forward and for society. It's an interesting study. And if you don't have that kind of foundation of how the different philosophers consider the main theories, you're kind of left adrift, and you're really trying to recreate the philosophy that they've already kind of come upon and studied, and then a subsequent philosopher said, well, there's a hole in that theory, and then it develops over time. And if you don't study the philosophers of the past, you end up taking a long time just trying to, you figure out, well, wait, maybe we should look at these and study the form of something or some topic, and before you know it, you've rediscovered Plato.
Yeah.
Oh wait, that was already thought of how many thousands of years ago, and it certainly would speed things up to have read Plato's theories, and then Aristotle and Kant and Hegel and Descartes and all that.
Yes, that's an impressive list, just named off the top of your head.
Well, there's
you have the table of contents.
Yeah, but my glasses aren't on, so I can't actually read it. But no, I mean, so those are the big ones. I always enjoyed Kant, and I don't know if it's going to be in here, but there's one question that when I was in undergrad that everybody else was baffled by. I'm kind of going a little off topic, but
that's all right.
There was it was a discussion of and of course I'm gonna have to relearn all this because it's been such a long time since I studied it. But there was a scenario where it was describing or trying to figure out whether Kant had the right theory about like absolute honesty, or whether it's ever okay to lie. And the theory, the scenario was, what if some woman comes banging your door and says, "There's a madman with an axe going to kill me. Can I come in and in your house?" And you say you let her in, and they shut the door, and then knock on the door, and there's a madman with an axe out front. And the question is, do you? And he says, "Where is she?" Well, are you justified in telling the lie that she's not there, or do you have to tell him the truth? I mean, is it wrong to tell the lie under those circumstances? And one theory is like it's always wrong to tell a lie. I never really understood the question because my thought was you try to kill the guy with the axe. I mean, you don't ever get to answer the question, but that wasn't an option. So I don't know. I think I got that marked off because you kill the guy with the axe, or you die trying. So you don't have to reach the ethical question of whether or not you have to tell this crazy man with an axe. But of course, I guess that kind of defeats the real morality of the question. Kind
of a behold a man moment, like Diogenes with the plucked chicken. Just think. Do you not know that story?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember which Greek philosopher it was, but they philosophized that a man is a featherless biped, and Diogenes, who's kind of a crazy philosopher who lived in a barrel with nothing, ran into the forum with a full plucked chicken and said, "Behold a man," to kind of poke fun at the argument, I guess, while still following the rules, really.
Right, I like that. Yes,
you kind of followed the rules, but still broke the argument, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's I guess the differences between theory and practical. And I was always like, well, I just killed the guy.
I guess that's a fault of philosophy. Sometimes we're too concerned with the big picture to look at the obvious answer of stop the guy with the axe.
Right. The theory. It's important to study theory. Yes. I don't mean to denigrate it, but theory without practical application is worthless.
Yes.
Anywho, so what else are we going to talk about?
Well, we've talked a lot about you. We've
what about
said nothing about me.
Well, you didn't ask about you.
I suppose I didn't. I don't need to ask me anything about me. I know
you're the host.
Yeah.
So I think, you've asked me questions. I don't really feel compelled to ask you questions. You should volunteer it.
I should just volunteer information about
myself? I mean, as we talk in the discussion, you mentioned the Diogenes barrel guy.
Yes.
That was great. So why don't you talk about, why you segue the conversation into why you want to study it? Why does a 17-year-old high school student?
There we go. There's some information about me. Nice little segue there.
Why does a 17-year-old high school student want to study the history of Western philosophy?
Because it's interesting. It's just
That's brilliant. That's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard.
I don't know. It just interests me. I kind of like looking at topics that don't really interest anybody else. At least my age, certainly. I mean, anybody else would look at this massive book and say, "What are you even doing with your time?" But for my purposes, I've looked a lot at really literature, linguistics, language. That's what I'm passionate about. I want to major in linguistics when I go off to college sometime next year. And really, a lot of my time has been spent with topics that don't really interest anybody else. As you're aware, I'm sure, of my love for Tolkien. I have books all around my room here, if you look around, that are mostly about Tolkien, not just the fictional works themselves.
Turn the camera so the viewers can see.
Yeah, the camera, our podcast camera, yeah, so that they can see. Yeah, that's a huge thing I'm passionate about, is just looking into the history of things, really looking at the reasonings behind why things happen. The perfect example is Tolkien. Not only have I read, The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, all that stuff, I have the full History of Middle-earth series over there discussing why he wrote what he did and all of the past formats behind it. And I guess that's a decent analogy of philosophy, I guess. Really, we have the final product here. Well, the almost final product, or incomplete product, because we don't really have a full answer, but we can look at the steps taken to get there. We can look at what different philosophers built upon, and look towards what we can build upon in the future.
So what is the answer? Why did he write those books?
Why did he write those books?
Yes. Give me the 2-sentence answer.
To explain his languages.
Really?
Yes, he made languages first, and then he kind of doodled around with some stories. A couple of them I know of one that he wrote in the trenches of World War I. J.R.R. Tolkien did. He fought in World War I. And it's strange, really, how those stories evolved, because he invented languages, several of them, many of them, too many for a normal person. So he took these languages and he wanted to create a history behind them, and he came up with these great tales of this Middle Earth, of Arda, the Earth. And he took them, and eventually some of them became childhood stories that he told to his kids, and that's how The Hobbit developed. And really, there's a neat little...
Those are really dark stories to tell to children.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, they are. I mean, he's got the evil eye or whatever.
Well, not the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit.
The Hobbit. Well, The Hobbit still had the bad orcs, and everybody's getting murdered and stuff.
Well,
and that scary goblin dude, what is his name?
It was the 30s.
Yeah, that's true. They're stronger back then.
Yeah, I suppose so. But that's very off topic.
So he literally he drafted his own language, and
yes.
So he wrote those or conceived of those stories just to explain why those languages would exist.
In a way, yeah. Because
so then, do you know why he wrote the languages?
Because it was fun. He talks about language, really. I've read his biography by Humphrey Carpenter, and Carpenter really talks about how he viewed a language, and he wrote about this in some of his letters. And he viewed it as an art form, really, and he looked at it the same way that we would look at music or at, like, the visual arts, paintings and stuff, and he could see, like, the beauty behind it and how it got to be where it is today. Like, another metaphor for philosophy, I guess, if we want to go that way. How it builds upon itself, how it affects people in their lives. And really just how it gets to where it is today, and how much beauty and love there is behind it.
So,
you look confused.
Well, I'm just, I kind of lost my thought. So he created so is it a romantic language? Is it based upon Latin?
No. I mean, well, there's several different languages.
Are we talking about like Elvish?
Yes, there's different types of Elvish too. Like, he was insanely detailed, and they never really came to completion because he was such a perfectionist that he continuously worked at them. And really, what we have available today in the forms of the languages really aren't what he fully wanted. Like, if he had lived for 20, 30 more years, who knows how different they would be.
So did it have like its own grammar and sentence structure and all
grammar,
that kind of
sentence structure, alphabet for some of them. And really, a couple of them, just the two most complete are Sindarin and Quenya, which are two Elvish languages. And Sindarin is based off of Welsh, loosely based off of Welsh, similar sounds, similar grammar in a way, and then Quenya's based loosely on Finnish, similar sounds, that sort of thing.
Did anyone else know of this language? Like, could he write a letter to someone and they could read it?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. Probably not.
Then, boy, that's really fascinating because it's so pointless. Because music you can play for someone. Creating your own language that no one can read, that is an interesting concept. It's even more in-depth question of the point of doing that. Like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there, does it make a sound? Well, if you write a letter in a foreign language, have you really written a letter? I mean, no one else can read it. You've written a letter to yourself.
Well, I suppose you just have to find more people who look at it the same way that you do. You know, if you go up and speak the language in front of a crowd, you'd have to find the same people who view it as an art and really appreciate the work that you put into it. Even if they don't fully understand the language, they can understand the love and beauty that you put into it.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if someone who is Pentecostal could speak in tongues, and that tongue can be Enya or whatever the
Quenya.
Quenya. Enya is a band from the 80s, I believe. Enya.
Yeah, well, actually,
no.
It's weird that you mention that because Enya has a song on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. Yeah, at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
we really got tied that all in.
Yeah, I know. We really went full circle. That was impressive.
So basically, you're telling the audience that you have a habit of studying pointless subjects.
Yes. That is. I guess that's where I've gone with that.
So that's interesting. So it's just kind of like the study that the creating the language would be like an art form.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even considered that. That's
not even just the creation of language, but just language as a whole. To study it and to study all the history behind it. He viewed that as really an art form. Mm-hmm.
I can see that. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So philosophy kind of ties into that because you have to use language and the structure. And I think a lot of the early debates and discussions between the early philosophers was a lot of semantics, a lot of arguing about language and how you describe things, and kind of got tied up in their discussions. But I guess we'll get into that as we read further into this book. But
that's really why I want to study linguistics when I go to college, because it is so fundamental in every aspect of society. Basically, think of an issue that doesn't have anything related to language within it. You can't do anything without language, and I think it's something truly unique about humans. It's almost what makes humans human in their ability to communicate ideas that are like beyond our understanding, really. Like these philosophical questions, like we can pose questions that we don't know the answer to through language, really. Just like we can express, what we don't know, really.
Yeah, and you've picked a good time to study because politically, with the changing language, where the left primarily is using language to control ideas and control actions by what is permissible, what you can say, and what you can't say. So they control the words and and they're changing the words, the meaning of words, which they've always done in modern communist and socialist countries. It's interesting how they keep doing it. And so you've picked an interesting and a dangerous time to study language.
That really is what I'm talking about, how it affects every aspect of society. You can't argue against a bad idea if they don't let you speak. Right? If they don't, if you can't use words to express, what's bad about it.
Yeah, and then the more powerful thing is to have a forced lie, so that they tell you a lie and they force you to repeat it, and they force you to say you acknowledge it as true, and that's the ultimate control, is to make you say something that you know is false, but say it as if it's true.
Can you give me an example of that? I'm not sure.
A more common example is forced conversions. So, like you see, different religious sects conquering another faith or another group, and they I'm reading a biography of a guy who was in Ireland. And the English were oppressing the Irish and Irish Catholics, and so they had, during the Great Famine, they had, some aid, so to speak, to the Irish, but they would have it at Protestant charities, and so they'd make the Catholic families convert to the Anglican Church in exchange for the food, so they wouldn't starve. And so they're making them, it's a little bit different religious. It's not known to be true or false. It's just the Catholics believed it was false, but they made him do it. And so you see those kind of forced conversions. But, I'm trying to think of a more modern example. But in communism, the big lie is the people are not starving, and there are literally people starving the street. You didn't see anybody starving. And they make people comply with that. And that's, you just lose so much control in yourself and that self-denial. And that's part of the control of a totalitarian state, and the most effective totalitarian states.
It's like what I was saying about how language is kind of what makes human human. If you strip people of their language, then are they even human?
They have nothing, because you don't even have religious faith. You don't have truth. And philosophy is mostly a study of truth, or trying to get closer to the truth, the big truth. Yes. That's what they nicknamed me in college. The big truth. The big truth.
I bet.
I'm just joking.
I figured.
That should be my nickname through this. I want you to call me for the rest of the podcast. The big truth.
Not calling you the big truth.
I'll call you the little truth.
That is so unnecessary.
So what's going to be our? Do we have anything else on our introductory thing?
I don't know.
Unlimited opinions.
Unlimited opinions. That's the name of our podcast.
So how many opinions do you have specifically?
Unlimited.
I have infinity.
Infinity. Yeah. That's the same thing as I said.
You said unlimited.
Yes.
Mine is a limit of infinity.
So it's unlimited.
I don't know. Is infinity unlimited?
I mean, I would assume so. I mean, I think.
Can you have more than an infinity?
I don't know.
I mean, mathematically,
there
are equations where you have infinity plus one, or
But I don't know. I think that's a topic for later.
Okay.
Maybe even, we're going into math next time we record with beginnings, Pythagoras to Plato. So we have something to look forward to with Pythagoras.
I hope there's discussions of triangles.
I assume there will be. All right. Should we go ahead and wrap up this episode, I suppose?
Yes.
All right. Well,
should we end with a song? No.
That is the last thing I think people would want to hear.
We need to have some introductory music.
Oh, I'm sure there will be.
You're going to add that?
Yes, I'm sure whatever listeners we have already heard it.
Oh.
Well, because
now wait a second.
Yes.
How could they have already heard it if it hasn't been done yet?
Because this is pre-recorded. Oh. They're not listening to this live. Does this answer your question?
You've confused me.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's the magic of editing.
Okay.
All right. Well, I've been Adam Bishop.
I am still Mark Bishop.
I don't think that's going to change. And this has been...
Well, you used the past tense.
Well, for this past 27 minutes, or 28 minutes now, I have been Adam Bishop for all those listening. And I'll continue to be Adam Bishop until next week. Until next episode of Unlimited Opinions.
Don't go change it.
That is not how we're ending this.